Good morning, everybody. My name is Liz Oyer, and I'm the pardon attorney. I'm delighted to welcome you all to the Department of Justice for our second annual celebration of Second Chances. President Biden has proclaimed April Second Chance Month. The president recognized that second chances make our communities stronger, safer, and more just. They make families and communities whole, and they help grow our economy. The Office of the Pardon Attorney works year-round to support second chances through Clemency. April is a time for us to gather to celebrate the work that has been done thus far and to recommit to the work that lies ahead. To kick off our celebration of second chances, it is my privilege to introduce Deputy Attorney General Lisa Monaco. For the last 3 years, Deputy Attorney General Monaco has overseen the department's clemency work. Under her leadership, the department has redoubled its efforts to make the clemency process more timely, transparent, and accessible. With Deputy Attorney General Monaco's support, the Office of the Pardon Attorney has doubled in size. She made it a priority to ensure that we have the resources needed to fulfill our important mission. Deputy Attorney General Monaco has championed our efforts to simplify the clemency application forms and to improve the review process from start to finish. She has stressed the importance of outreach and engagement with affected communities. She is committed to making clemency work for all those whose hopes are resting on second chances. It is my privilege to introduce Deputy Attorney General Monaco as our first speaker.
Good morning. Thank you, Liz, so much. It's wonderful to be here with you, and wonderful to also share the stage this morning with Martina Estrada, one of our terrific U.S. attorneys and leaders in the Justice Department on this and so many issues. Great to have you here as well, Martine. Thanks again, Liz, for that kind introduction. I want to add my welcome, to Liz's welcome. It's wonderful to see this great hall filled on such a terrific occasion. You know, we often honor the most significant achievements that advance the department's mission right here in this space. So I think it's fitting that we're together here recognizing Second Chance Month. In the preamble to the Constitution, the founders set forth that the primary purpose of our nation is to, and I quote, establish justice. At the Department of Justice, the only department in our federal government named for a value, that charge is obviously something that holds very special meaning. Establishing justice is about holding people accountable when they break the law, to be sure, but accountability alone isn't enough to establish justice. The justice we work for in this building requires more. It requires fairness, and that can include the opportunity for a second chance. Establishing justice means revisiting, assessing, and improving policies and punishments. It means helping those who run afoul of the law re-enter society so they can contribute to their communities. It means understanding that when people learn and grow, so too must our system. The Office of the Pardon Attorney exists for these very reasons. Clemency is a vital tool to establish justice. Clemency and the second chance that it offers can recognize redemption. It can reunite a family. It can restore the right to vote. And so I am so appreciative of Liz and her team for their critical work assisting the president on executive clemency decisions and breathing life into the clemency process. They're revising clemency applications to ensure greater accessibility and transparency, like ensuring forms are available in Spanish. They're traveling the country, visiting Federal Bureau of Prisons facilities to train staff and those in custody on the clemency process. And they're working with the urgency that's demanded by justice. Over the last 2 years, the team has reduced its average initial commutation, case processing times by over 85%. And they've reviewed close to 12,000 clemency applications in that time, a truly incredible number. And this year, we're also celebrating the 10th anniversary of the 2014 Clemency Initiative and its impact. The initiative invited petitions for commutations of sentences from those who likely would have received substantially lower sentences if convicted of the same offenses years later. Partnering with folks across this building, the Office of the Pardon Attorney worked with the Federal Bureau of Prisons to lead that effort. And in doing so, they changed lives. I'm so happy to be able to welcome back to the department two of my predecessors and friends who were instrumental in laying the groundwork for that initiative. Former Deputy Attorneys General David Ogden and Jim Cole. We would not be where we are today without your leadership and commitment to clemency. So thank you so much for being here and for your leadership. Now, in recent years, the Clemency Initiative has been furthered by President Biden's commitment to second chances. In December, the President issued his second categorical pardon for certain marijuana offenses by expanding it to people who used marijuana or violated certain federal regulations. And federal actions like this is part of the larger effort for second chances, an effort being led really by all of you. Past and present colleagues here at the department devoted to this issue, federal defenders, public defenders, and advocates, and those celebrating their own second chance stories and those of others. We have so many people to celebrate, but I do want to extend a special thanks and welcome to all the clemency recipients here today, including Alice Marie Johnson, Jason Hernandez, and Sharonda Jones, who are participating in today's event. Thank you especially for being willing to share your time, your stories, your perspective. Your stories are an inspiration for those who are still working toward their own second chance. And to the members of the bench and the bar, especially the federal defender and public defender communities, and all the advocates who work so tirelessly on behalf of those seeking a second chance, thank you for your hard work. Together, we can move our justice system closer to meeting its promise to the American people, an aspiration summed up neatly by my first boss here in the Justice Department, Attorney General Janet Reno, who said, and I quote, "The keystone to justice is the belief that the legal system treats all fairly." Second Chance Month is the right time to focus on the promise presented by a fresh start. And this month, and every day, the work represented here is bringing us closer to establishing justice. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for sharing your stories. And thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Deputy Attorney General Monaco, for those remarks and for your leadership. For those of you who are standing in the back, this entire front row is empty. Please don't be shy. Come on up, grab a seat. This presentation's not going to be short, so you might want to find a seat. I'm really excited to have here today U.S. Attorney Martine Estrada, who is our next speaker. U.S. Attorney Estrada heads the largest U.S. Attorney's office outside of D.C., serving nearly 20 million people in the Central District of California. U.S. Attorney Estrada has dedicated much of his legal career to serving marginalized communities through extensive pro bono work in private practice and through his many years of service as an AUSA. As a prosecutor, Mr. Estrada distinguished himself through his commitment to fairness and discretion and his belief in treating all participants in the legal system with dignity and humanity. As U.S. Attorney, Mr. Estrada created an executive position in his office dedicated to ethics and post-conviction issues, including the review of clemency applications. He also formed one of the first federal conviction integrity committees. U.S. Attorney Estrada has established himself as a leader in the department's work to ensure fairness and equity in the criminal justice system. I am thrilled to welcome him to our celebration of second chances.
Well, thank you, Liz, for that, and good morning, everyone. Great to see you all here, and I will echo the point that was made. There's plenty of room up here in the front. Please feel free to take a seat. Thank you so much for having me. As Liz mentioned, my name is Martin Estrada. I'm the U.S. Attorney based in Los Angeles. We have the largest district in the country at just under 20 million people. That'll become relevant later to some of the things I will mention. But we certainly take very seriously our commitment to do justice, and we take a very holistic approach to what we consider to be justice. Now, we're here on a very special day where we celebrate second chances, the pardons and commutations, the important work that the Office of the Pardon Attorney has done for years in this area. As many of you know, and as the Deputy Attorney General referenced, the concept of pardons and clemency has a long history in our legal system. It dates back to even before the founding of this country, to English law from 1,300 years ago. We see this concept even before that in Roman law, in Greek law, throughout our history. And even goes back further than that, because really the idea of pardons and commutations goes back to Scripture and the ideas of mercy and forgiveness. We see those concepts echoed in the Old Testament, in the New Testament, in the Quran, throughout our spiritual history, which is important. But in terms of mercy and forgiveness, it's not just something that the ancients practiced. We all practice it in our everyday lives. You all practice it in your lives, whether with loved ones, children, parents, significant others, whether with coworkers, and even with perfect strangers. We practice it each and every day. And we know from our daily practice and our experiences that mercy and forgiveness are concepts that are not fixed in time. What is appropriate at one time may change over time. And that may be because the offense or the wrong that was committed may change over time in terms of how we look at it, and whether it's something that merits the consequences that were given at a particular time. And then the individual, the person who had a sentence imposed, those facts change over time. And we see people do amazing things even after they've made mistakes which have them run into our justice system. I want to talk about my office and the work that we've done in this area and how important it is to us. As I mentioned, we take our mandate of being part of the Department of Justice very seriously. And when we say the Department of Justice, as Liz mentioned, that's a virtue, it's a value. We don't consider ourselves the Department of Wins. We don't consider ourselves the Department of Convictions. We consider ourselves the Department of Justice, and that means doing what is just, doing what is right. And when I used to explain this to students when I was at AUSA, I would mention one of my favorite movies, Do the Right Thing. That reference has become a little dated. A lot of kids don't remember that movie or know any Spike Lee movies anymore. But really, it's rooted in that concept that our job is to do the right thing. And when we think of what is right, that also changes over time. And it depends on changes in facts and circumstances. I was speaking earlier this week to a group of law students at USC, and they asked me if there were any cases that were significant to me and really affected my career. And I told them about a couple cases, and both those cases were ones I did when I first started as a prosecutor. And the first was my very first case, involved an individual named Cedric Burris. And the first file I got as I became a prosecutor, and I'd gone to law school, I'd worked at a firm, I thought I knew a bit about the federal system, but then I got this case where there was an individual who was caught in his brother's apartment selling crack cocaine. He had a pound of crack and 2 guns. And he was looking, based on that, based on the mandatory minimum sentences, 15 years imprisonment. And it just blew my mind. I couldn't believe that someone caught in this particular window of time would be looking at those types of drastic consequences. And I remember talking to my supervisor, talking to my wife, talking to friends, like, this is mind-boggling to me that you could have a system like this where you could have these types of penalties. And it helped me understand the power of the tools in the federal system and how those tools need to be exercised very judiciously and very carefully. Now, ultimately, that case went away. There was a little problem in the search that made the case go away, but I did learn that lesson, and I took it forward to all the rest of the work that I did. The other case that really impressed upon me the work that we do here in the department was a case involving an individual named Anthony Robinson. Anthony Robinson was a member of a gang in South Los Angeles called the Great Street Crips that operates out of Watts. And he was caught up in this major gang takedown. And you might remember back in the early 2000s, we did a lot of these big gang takedowns. And he was defendant 2021. And as we were processing that case, and I was new to the case, his attorney came to me and said, "You got the wrong guy." And I said, "Well, everyone says they're the wrong guy. That doesn't really tell me much." But he told me, "I've been doing this for 30 years. You got the wrong guy." I said, "Well, help me out here. Give me something that shows me we got the wrong guy." He got me some work records, some statements from his employer saying he was in a different place at the time the offense conduct took place. I looked at that. Certainly those types of things can be made up, can be fabricated. But then I started listening to the wire calls because I had doubt in my mind. And I started comparing Robinson's voice to the person who's on the recording who went by the nickname Ant. And that was Robinson's nickname. But I noticed something weird. The voices didn't match up. I remember talking to my supervisor, and keep in mind, I was brand new, so I was at the bottom of the chain there. And I talked to my supervisor, and she said, "Listen, young'un, you just don't know how the system works. There are different quality of recordings. You're just not listening to it the right way." But I still had doubt, so I kept listening and analyzing it, looking at certain words and comparing those words. Eventually, I appealed through my supervisor, her supervisor, and ultimately to the crim chief, who was about 4 levels ahead of me. And we realized that there's actually another Ant that works as part of Great Street, and that was the guy who in fact did it, and we had the wrong person. So I got approval to dismiss the case. I remember you have to file a motion to dismiss a case in federal court. And I remember at the hearing for the motion, where we asking to dismiss the case against Anthony Robinson, he turned to me with tears in his eyes, thanking me for what I'd done. I couldn't believe it. I thought, this dude is thanking me. We screwed up. We're the ones who screwed up, and he's thanking me. But because his experiences with the justice system had been such that he hadn't gotten second chances, he was deeply appreciative of us just doing our job, which is the right thing. And that, of course, taught me about how important it is to be thorough and to make sure we exercise those powerful federal tools in the right way. I have brought that philosophy to our office, and we take second chances very seriously. We do that in many ways. Even at the front end, we have a program we're very proud of called the Conviction and Sentencing Alternatives Program, short for CASA. And that is a program where we look at individuals that may have committed offense conduct, and maybe they don't merit the heavy penalties, the mandatory minimums that others get, and they may be on a probationary track or diversionary track. We have a great program there. We work with the Deputy Federal Public Defenders. We work with the Chief Judge of our district to make sure we expand that program and robustly bring people into the program. I'm very proud to say that in the department now, through the Attorney General's policy of December 2022, we look very carefully now whether it is appropriate to apply a mandatory minimum sentence, and the Attorney General appropriately has us look at the individualized circumstances to do that. At the sentencing stage, we also look very closely and make sure we're dealing with the sentences, the tools we have, in the most just manner. We bring all the facts before the court and make sure that we're not imposing heavy sentences without thought to the individual. And lastly, as Liz mentioned, when I came in, I established an executive role in my office called the Chief of Ethics and Post-Conviction Review. This is an incredibly important role in my office. This is a role where we have a person who's worked in our office for over 20 years, incredibly experienced, used to be one of the supervisors in our appellate section, looks at all these requests for pardons and commutations and does a thorough analysis. And this is really where the concept of second chances shows itself to be department-wide, because the Office of the Pardon Attorney, Liz and her folks, do remarkable work in this area. They look far and wide for appropriate cases. They bring those cases to our attention. They partner with us to look at the facts and look at whether a commutation is appropriate. I'm happy to say that we dig deep into these cases and look at exactly the things I talked about. Whether the offense is one that would merit the same type of sentence today. Things have changed a lot since the 90s and the early 2000s. And also what the individual has done while incarcerated. And I want to give you a couple examples of where we've recommended commutations to give you an idea of some of the folks who are getting these second chances. So first, obviously I won't use names. We want to keep people's privacy. But one individual was someone who is not presently incarcerated, but whose conviction posed an obstacle to obtaining legal residence in this country. The defendant had been convicted of money laundering related to drug trafficking, but had cooperated and testified in the case. The person had been convicted 25 years ago and had since then showed a complete law-abiding history, no further run-ins with the law, and that was an individual we felt strongly should get commutation. Another individual I'll mention is one who was serving a life sentence for a cocaine conspiracy in the 1980s. And at the time, the judge said it was one of the biggest cocaine conspiracies he had seen. But that defendant is now 75 years old, has served over 400 months incarceration, and today, under current law, would not be incarcerated and would not get that lengthy a sentence. But on top of that, this individual, while in prison, had spent over 25 years tutoring other inmates, helping them get certificates, helping them get degrees, and contributing to the people who were around him. And that was another individual we felt very strongly deserved commutation. This type of work is fundamental to our system of justice. It's not often publicized. The media, the public don't always focus on these issues, but it's just as important as every charge, every indictment, every conviction that we have. Because what it shows and what it brings to the table is that to be a prosecutor, to do justice, also requires compassion. It requires mercy, and it requires forgiveness. We can't look at individuals, we can't look at offenses in a rote way. We cannot look at them in a check-the-box way. We need to look at the individual, and we need to look holistically at people and recognize that there can be change and recognize that there can be second chances. So with that, let me again thank you all for having me. I want to very much recognize that the work that we're doing here could not happen if not for the Office of the Pardon Attorney. They really deserve all the credit in this, and I thank them for the work they're doing, not just here, but also nationally. Thank you.
Thank you, Martine. That was great. We really appreciate your flying all the way from California to join us for our celebration of second chances. In his first 3 years in office, President Biden has used his clemency power to grant pardons and commutations to 126 individuals. He has also pardoned thousands of people convicted of possessing marijuana. Each one of the president's commutation grants has transformed the life of a deserving recipient. You will see that in a moment in a short video featuring 6 individuals who recently received clemency from President Biden. 2 of these individuals were serving life sentences. Connie Avalos was sentenced to life in prison for a methamphetamine offense. Her sentence was commuted twice, first by President Obama to 20 years, and then by President Biden to time served. Early Barber was sentenced to life in prison for a crack cocaine offense. President Biden commuted his sentence last December, and he is now in a halfway house with a scheduled release date of April 20th of this year. You will hear from Connie, Early, and 4 others who were granted clemency in December of 2023. Let's roll our video.
My name's Kenny Winkler. I'm from Indianapolis, Indiana. Clemency has changed my life on every aspect.
My name is Quentin Goodley. I'm in Austin, Texas. I got my CDL within the first 2 months that I was out.
My name is James Barber, and I'm from Gastonia, North Carolina. I was at home on home confinement when I got the call, and it seemed unreal. It was just, like I said, it was so amazing. I thought he was kidding with me, and I felt so blessed.
My name's Connie Avalos, and I live in Riverside, California. It was very overwhelming to actually hear that the President of the United States had granted me commutation of my sentence.
My name is Esaias Tucker from Tallahassee, Florida. I previously filed 3 clemency forms under 3 presidents, and the last being under Joe Biden.
My name is Early Barber. I'm from Dothan, Alabama. He said, I have a message from the warden. And you just received the clemency. I just bust out and hollered like, thank you, Jesus, thank you, Jesus. I just received the clemency. And everybody that was in the unit, because at the time we was on lockdown, and everybody started clapping. He finna go home, man. That's a good man. He finna go home. And I just fell on my knees right there. And the officer like, man, he just looked at me. And I like, man, the next question I asked him, when is I'm going home?
You know, when I left for prison, I was involved with my son before then. He was 4, getting ready to turn 5. Well, he was 14, getting ready to turn 15 because I was gone 10 years and 3 days.
My child's mother was pregnant at the time that I was incarcerated. So with that being said, my child is now 11 and I was incarcerated for 11 and a half years, meaning that I had never spent a day in the world with my child.
But yeah, before I had got out, I did it. I had a plan, you know, just, I was in there reading books. I wasn't just doing time. Like, I actually was in there planning my life of whenever I get out. But he had called me and let me know that I had clemency. I had to ask him, like, hey, you're not playing with me, are you? Like, is this serious? And then as soon as he got off the phone with me, I called my mama. I told her not to tell nobody, but she still told everybody.
Seeing people actually get clemency was enough for me to be like, okay, this is something I need to continue to do because at any time, it could be my name on the list and being called in. And it actually happened. It actually happened.
Being locked up, I've had grandkids that I never, got to see or anything. So now I can go and I can see them and I can actually physically hold them and touch them and play with them and all that right there. So that is my newfound goal in life right now, just being with them and getting to spend more time with them.
I feel a whole lot freer. Now I can actually work over the road, get to see the world. I've never been out of Texas, so I'm looking forward to doing that.
I'm beyond grateful to Joe Biden for the opportunity.
To all the people who work at the pardon attorney, I know there was hundreds of thousands of applications that were sent from 2014. And I'm thankful for the diligent workers. I'm just grateful. I'm grateful for the opportunity to live out my life a free woman.
Even in the massive sentence, you can never give up. And it's like you have to keep fighting, you have to keep pushing, believing in yourself and believing that something can happen.
Don't think that prison is the end. It's the beginning of a new you, if you'll allow it.
I want to thank all the folks who took the time to record their stories and to the amazing multimedia team who put together that video. I think that the 6 commutation recipients you saw are watching today, and I'm sorry they couldn't be with us in person. Last April, President Biden commuted the sentences of 31 people. Over the last few weeks, the pardon team has been able to catch up with some of these folks to see what they have been doing with their first year of freedom. We have an amazing slideshow for you, so let's take a look. Thank you again to everyone who sent pictures, participated in our videos. I think it's just so important to see the individuals who really benefit from the clemency grants that the president has made. And you've got a great example of those folks today who've participated by video and who are here in the flesh, and I'll introduce some of them later. Our next speakers represent the department's Office of Justice Programs, which works with partners across the country to support second chances through reentry programming and other initiatives. Brent Cohen is OJP's acting principal deputy assistant attorney general. He has a deep background in education, corrections, and juvenile justice reform. Before joining DOJ, Brent was a White House fellow, vice president and interim CEO of Just Leadership USA, and vice president for youth engagement at the Center for American Progress. I am honored to turn it over to Brent to give some remarks and introduce his colleague, Eddie Bocanegra.
Good morning. Thank you, Liz. It is such an honor to be here today. This is a special event because it's about advancing and restoring justice and giving people another chance. As Liz mentioned, I serve as the acting principal deputy assistant attorney general at the Office of Justice Programs. OJP is the department's principal funding, research, and statistical component. Throughout my years in city and federal government, I've been fortunate to work closely with directly impacted leaders who have informed my thinking and approach to this work. During my time at OJP, during the Obama administration, we sought to formalize this approach by creating the Second Chance Fellowship, where we brought on board a directly impacted, experienced, and quite incredible professional to inform our reentry grants and efforts. This has been such a driving force in my career that when I left federal government at the end of the Obama administration, I joined the team at Just Leadership USA, an organization dedicated specifically to investing in the leadership of those most impacted by the justice system. I am pleased to say that since Assistant Attorney General Amy Solomon and I have been back at the department, we have reinvigorated the Second Chance Fellowship, and we have brought on board 2, soon to be 3, more Second Chance Fellows to inform the breadth of our reentry portfolio. So while I've long had an appreciation for the importance of this work, it came into even clearer focus for me a couple of years ago when my neighbor moved out of his house and a small crew of guys started doing construction and repair. Now, I befriended the lead guy because I live in a row house in DC, and so that house's problems are my problems, and there were some things that quite frankly needed to be fixed. And after a few conversations over many months, he asked me what I did for a living, and I talked to him about investing in communities to advance safety and about investing in and supporting people returning home from incarceration. After a few more conversations over several more months, he shared with me that he had been incarcerated on a life sentence in federal prison. And he had received clemency from President Obama. And now he was using his second chance to build a small business with his son. Of course, I would have had no idea if he hadn't chosen to share his story with me. And it was such a powerful reminder for me of the incredible work that the Office of the Pardon Attorney does. They literally provide people with another chance at life, and I am grateful to them for doing this life-saving and heroic work. It is now my great honor to introduce my colleague, Eddie Bocanegra, who serves as the Senior Advisor to the Assistant Attorney General for Community Violence Intervention. Eddie previously served as the founding executive director of Ready Chicago and is a legend in the CVI field. Please join me in welcoming Eddie Bocanegra.
Good morning, and thank you, Brent. Thank you, Liz, and to all of our wonderful colleagues here in the audience, and for our special guest. I want to start off by just a quick story. A couple years ago, I was driving to a small town, central Illinois being my home state, to purchase a couple old gas pumps. I love classic cars, and I love that vintage style. And so I am driving about 3 hours into central Illinois. And I was meeting up with a gentleman named Cliff. Cliff was older gentleman, retired, worked in the highways, repairing them. And I got to know about Cliff through the conversations of being there with him. And it's ironic that my intention was to go there for maybe 15 minutes, pick up the gas pumps, and head back home. But those 15 minutes turned out to be about 4+ hours. And what was interesting about those 4 hours or so was that, Cliff was excited to show me around his barn. This was around the middle cornfields, and when I stepped into the barn, I'd never been to Disneyland, but I'm sure this is what it feels like being a kid in a playground like that, and I just felt at awe seeing all these vintage stuff there. And as he explained to me what each one of these pumps and the years and so on, the history of these things, I was just taken away because I didn't know much about this. But then he asked me the questions, what do you do? And so I said to him, I work at the Department of Justice. And so he said, what does that mean? And so I started explaining to him what I did around community violence intervention, supporting organizations on the ground to help to reduce gun violence. And I noticed a shift in his behavior. He talked a lot about the importance of Second Amendment. He talked about accountability, to which I agree. And in those few hours that we had going back and forth, I ended up trying to figure out, how do I connect with a person that we come from two different worlds, but yet we have this shared interest? And so I said to Cliff, Cliff, the way that I could explain this to you, because it's very obvious that you are in the business of restoration. You spend your time to restore these gas pumps and these classic cars. Well, in many ways, I'm in the business of restoring people and communities. It was that moment that it clicked for him. And of course, after that, he started showing me around his pond, and if I ever want to come by and go fishing with him, that'd be great. But what my point here is that sometimes people with different walks of life, we could find that common ground, and we could actually make the connections, such as in this case, that he's into restoring gas pumps, and I'm into the business of restoring people. I'd like to take a moment to read some excerpts from a letter that I wrote 10 years ago. And this is actually the second time that I'm reading this letter. And it's a letter that I wrote to my preceding judge. And I want you to bear with me for a second, because this letter was written in September 15 of 2013. It says, Honorable Judge, you were the preceding judge on my case, and I'm writing to you to thank you. You could have sentenced me for far more years than you did. Instead, you gave me enough time to reflect on what I did and how I had been living my life. And yet not so much time that I wouldn't get a second chance to make amends. Judge, I didn't have an excuse for what I did. Though my dad was an alcoholic and violent, I had both parents in my life. I knew between right and wrong. As a result of my actions, my family was forced to sell their home, abandon their lives in Chicago, and move to Texas to start their lives again. When I was a teenager, the way I saw myself getting out of the street life was through enlisting as a Marine. Shortly before I caught my case, I was talking to a Marine recruiter, and I was just weeks away from enlisting. Years later, my brothers realized that dream that I never had. My brother Gabriel enlisted in the Army when he was 18 years old, and my brother Fernando enlisted in the Marines when he was 17. Gabriel's unit was one of the first units deployed into the Iraq War in 2003, earning a Bronze Star and other awards for his service. Fernando is still in active duty and currently working with intelligence. My sister Ingrid joined the National Guard and then went to work as a prison guard in Texas. Currently, she works for Human Resources for the town of McAllen, Texas. And my sister Edith works for Homeland Security. There were many lessons I took from the years I did in prison. I studied people, I learned their stories, including what led them to prison. I met many intelligent people who unfortunately made poor choices, most of the time out of need or survival. Most of the people I met who were doing long periods of time, caught their cases when they were young. I also realized how fortunate I was to have a caring family and friends. I had an entire family, an extended family and friends who came to visit me, who wrote to me regularly. Sometimes my mother would take a bus Sometimes my mother would take a bus all the way from the Rio Grande Valley in Texas, and my brothers would fly from Kuwait, from Afghanistan and South Korea, just to come and visit me. I was motivated to make the most of my time and develop a plan for when I was released. I have been out almost 5 years. I have accomplished a lot in this time. I consider my most significant achievement to be my marriage and the birth of my daughter. After being released in November 18 of 2008, I enrolled in a community college. I began mentoring at-risk youth on a volunteer basis. And then within a few months, I was hired by Ceasefire, a program that engaged high-risk individuals to minimize gun violence. On the side, I developed several community-based programs, one that teaches art to kids, and another one that helps parents who have lost their children to violence through a peer mentoring program. And I also started a program called Urban Warriors that brought U.S. combat veterans with at-risk youth to talk about the process of trauma. I was featured as one of the main subjects in a recent documentary called The Interrupters. And after 3 years, I was hired as a congregational organizer with the Community Renewal Society. I developed a coalition titled Force, Fighting to Overcome Records and Create Equality. Force advocated for increased employment opportunities for people with records. And this spring, I was recruited to the YMCA, and I am proud to say that I am presently the executive director of the YMCA of Metro Chicago's Youth Safety and Violence Prevention. Apart from my work experience, I've continued my education since the moment I was released. After taking a few courses at a local community college, I enrolled in the social work program at Northeastern Illinois University. I was the keynote speaker at my graduation in May of 2012, and I spoke in front of 4,000 people. Currently, I'm halfway through earning my master's at the University of Chicago of the School of Social Service Administration. The whole purpose of my work and continuing education is so that I can become a stronger advocate and support the people who stand in the shoes that I stand in. My desire is that through my own example, I can give hope to others. I am grateful for the time you gave me. I've waited this long to thank you for two reasons. And the first, and the most obvious, is because I had to be off parole. But the second, I wanted to show you how your compassion paid dividends in my life. I've been planning on writing you this letter even before I was released from prison. My cousin is a probation officer, and through him, I made a mutual friend of ours. I told her about my intentions to write the preceding judge on my case, and when she asked me who it was, we both realized that we both know you, and she offered to hand-deliver this letter. I hope one day our paths cross again, but in much different circumstances. I am living a life of repentance to make the most of the second chance that I've been given. Sincerely, Eddie Bocanegra. In preparation for today, and given the theme, I felt that there is no better audience than this one who would truly understand where I'm coming from. While this letter is more about redemption and gratitude, this letter is also about having to justify our existence and our purpose. I share this letter with you as an example of what my journey has looked like and the evolution of my career. 10 years after writing this letter, I now could say the following. I'm a proud father of 8 children, my 9th on the way. You gotta give it up to me, because most of the time we just give it up to women. And let me tell you, I am an active father there. We have a new home. We have a farm in which we use to invite those same mothers that 13, 14 years ago I was privileged to meet, to bring them to the space, to share what God's given us with those who don't have, and to use this space to heal. I graduated with my master's in social work. I've traveled all over the world. I ran one of the largest anti-violence programs in which Brent referenced, which is the only one that's had a randomized controlled trial study with this particular population. And now I'm serving as a senior advisor for CVI to the Office of the Assistant Attorney General. Sometimes it's hard to look back and to see how far each one of us has come and the work that each one of us are doing. And so I just encourage you to find the time to look back and reflect. And even though today I'm inspired by many of the stories that I heard, there's still a long way for us to go. And so I want to say two last things here. And speaking of celebrations, 2 years ago, CVI was a concept that most folks in the federal government didn't know much about. However, what my colleagues in the federal government did know is that there was a need to look at our community assets and to think about public safety differently. We've invested nearly $200 million in community violence intervention, and in large part to support, in many cases, some of the people that you're referencing today. And we need to continue to find ways of how to elevate the importance of both your work and the importance of restoring. I want to conclude by sharing this one exciting piece of news. This past December, my governor of Illinois, Governor Pritzker, after 2 years of patiently waiting, signed on my petition of clemency. And so let me tell you what that means, not just for me, but for many people who are walking my shoes. It means that our government care about these issues. It means that there is quite a bit of advocacy that's gone forward to help humanize the people that we're all referring to. What this also means is that we're helping to create a pathway for those who've been formerly incarcerated. That's what your work really means for many people like myself. That's what it means for the people you saw on the screen. That's what it means for many people who are also in this room. And so while my message is for many of my colleagues, my message is also for those individuals who share the same journey that I've experienced, is that don't ever set that ceiling. Because never in a million years would I have thought that I would be where I'm at now. And just to put a fine point on that, 16 years ago, my dream was to sell hot dogs because I thought nobody was ever going to give me a job. And here I am. So I thank you for all those who are doing amazing work behind the scenes that often maybe don't get the credit or the spotlight. But I thank you, and Liz, I thank you for you and your office for all your contributions and helping us to push to create more justice in this country. Thank you.
Thank you, Eddie, for sharing your story, and Brent for being with us today, and for all that you both do to support Second Chances. This month, April 2024, marks an important milestone for Clemency. It is the 10th anniversary of the launch of the 2014 Clemency Initiative under the leadership of President Barack Obama and Attorney General Eric Holder. The 2014 Clemency Initiative was the first time executive clemency was used to systematically correct unjust and excessive sentences. It was the first time clemency was thought of as a way to undo some of the damage done by harsh mandatory minimum sentencing laws. The initiative was a historic undertaking on an unprecedented scale. It was all hands on deck in the Department of Justice, the White House Counsel's Office, and the Defense Bar. Many of you in this room played key roles in its success. The impact of the initiative was tremendous. Over 1,700 people received commutations of sentence. Over 500 life sentences were commuted to terms of years. For these individuals, clemency meant a second chance at life. Hundreds of families were made whole again. Hundreds of our fellow citizens are today thriving in their communities instead of withering behind bars. We have a lot more work to do, but this is a day to pause and reflect on how far we've come. It's a day to celebrate how much has been accomplished thanks to so many of you. We have here today some legendary figures from the Clemency Initiative. Jason Hernandez was one of the first to receive clemency from President Obama. In December 2013, the president commuted the sentences of 8 people, most whom were serving life. Jason was one of them. 1 month later, in January 2014, Jim Cole, then Deputy Attorney General, stunned the legal world by announcing that those 8 commutations were only a first step. In a speech to the New York State Bar Association, Jim said this: "There is much more to be done because there are others like the 8 who were granted clemency. There are more low-level, nonviolent drug offenders who remain in prison and who would likely have received a substantially lower sentence if convicted of precisely the same offense today. We need to," he said, "this is not fair and it harms our criminal justice system. We need to identify these individuals and recommend them to the president for clemency." Jim set the interwebs abuzz with this announcement. A popular law blog called his comments intriguing and puzzling. A well-known law professor called it a bombshell. Cynics praised the idea as admirable, but questioned whether DOJ could really get the job done. Well, it did. The Clemency Initiative was formally announced on April 23rd, 2014. The defense bar immediately answered the call for assistance. A massive effort known as Clemency Project 2014 was established. The project was a joint effort of the ABA, the ACLU, FAM, NACDL, and federal defenders. We have folks from all those groups here today. I want to especially acknowledge Cynthia Roseberry and Mary Price, 2 principal architects of the Clemency Project. These amazing women worked tirelessly for 3 years to ensure that no one was overlooked. They assembled an army of volunteer attorneys, screened tens of thousands of cases, and helped thousands of incarcerated people apply for clemency. The Office of the Pardon Attorney worked around the clock to review these applications and prepare recommendations in each case. U.S. attorneys and judges around the country weighed in. Staff in the Office of the Deputy Attorney General and the White House worked through the final hours of the administration to act on these recommendations. I want to especially acknowledge Neil Eggleston, who's here today. Neil served as White House counsel for 3 years at the height of the initiative. I believe he personally reviewed and briefed the president on every clemency recommendation. I don't think he slept. He has been referred to as, quote, "the man who ran Obama's clemency machine." When all was said and done, the administration made 1,928 grants of clemency. Some of these recipients are here today, and many others are watching by video. In the words of Neil Eggleston, their incredible stories demonstrate why our nation is a nation of second chances. I'd like to invite Neil, Jim, Cynthia, and Mary to join me on stage. I'd also like to invite up David Ogden, Jim's predecessor as DAG, who laid the groundwork for the initiative and later represented clemency recipient Norman Brown. I also want to invite up all the commutation recipients who are here today, and please hold your applause as I call their names. David Barron, John Gargano Jr., Ernest Glover, Jason Hernandez, Marvin Holloway, Sharonda Jones and her attorney Britney Barnett, Alice Marie Johnson and her supporter Ed Stanton, Danielle Metz, Adrienne Miller, Charles Russell, Gregory Warwick, Fulton Washington, and Chris Young. I also want to recognize Sapna Mirchandani, Nikichi Taifa, Catherine Yanes, and all the other Clemency Project 2014 advocates who represented these folks and others. I want to acknowledge as well the staff of the White House Counsel's Office, the Office of the Deputy Attorney General, and the Office of the Pardon Attorney who are here today. It took a village to get these folks home, so let's give them all a huge round of applause. All right, I'm going to ask the folks who are joining us for panel discussions to remain on stage, and everyone else can return to your seats. Thank you. I'm pleased to introduce our first two panelists, Jim Cole and Jason Hernandez. Former Deputy Attorney General Jim Cole is one of the longest-serving DAGs in history. He held the position for 4 years, from 2011 to 2015. I think that counts as 28 years in DAG years. Jim recently retired from the law firm Sidley Austin after an illustrious career in private practice and public service, including 13 years at DOJ early in his career. As DAG, Jim made his mark as a supporter of smart on crime policies, including sentencing reform and reentry programs. He said, and this is a quote, "We have to stop filling our jails and start addressing root causes of criminal conduct like substance abuse and mental health." When he left the post of DAG in 2015, Jim listed among his proudest achievements spearheading initiatives that transformed the department's approaches to clemency and drug enforcement policy. Jim, welcome back to DOJ. Through clemency, Jim's path crossed with that of his fellow panelist, Jason Hernandez. In 1998, Jason was sentenced to life in prison for his role in a drug conspiracy. Jason started selling drugs with his older brothers in his hometown of McKinney, Texas, when he was 15 years old. He was just 21 when he was sentenced to spend the rest of his life in prison. While incarcerated, Jason committed himself to completely turning his life around. He earned his GED, completed a paralegal program, and earned a welding certification. He became an advocate for others serving life sentences. In 2011, Jason applied for clemency. In a letter to President Obama, he wrote this: "I have dreams, Mr. President, big dreams, and not just dreams of being free, but dreams of becoming someone who is going to make a difference in this world. But to speak of my goals as dreams doesn't do them justice, for I can see everything I want to accomplish and how I'm going to accomplish it as clear as day. All I need now is for you to give me a chance to turn those dreams into reality." On December 19, 2013, the president gave Jason that chance. Jason was released in 2015 and returned home to McKinney. Jason's accomplishments since then are too many to list, but here are a few. He started a nonprofit called At Last to support Latino high school students seeking higher education and leadership opportunities. He partnered with the officer who arrested him to create Christmas in McKinney, which gives holiday gifts to children whose parents are incarcerated or deported. He won grant funding to purchase the corner store where he first sold drugs and transform it into a small business called La Tiendita, which offers healthy, affordable groceries in a food desert community. He has served as a consultant for the ACLU and Open Society Foundation. He has testified in Congress on clemency reform, and in July 2023, he was featured on Good Morning America, where he was named a hometown hero and given a key to the city of McKinney. In short, Jason did exactly what he said he would do in his letter to President Obama. Please give Jason and Jim a round of applause. Right here for you, Jason. Jason, I'm going to start with you. Can you take us back to that day in 1998 when you were sentenced to life in prison? Can you talk to us about what it felt to hear that and how you processed that information afterwards?
You know, Liz, the weird thing about that situation is that I can't really recall what happened that day. And after just learning in prison, they have something that's called dissociative dementia. And when you experience a trauma that you can't handle, your mind just blocks it out. And all I literally just remember is looking in the audience, but not seeing nobody, hearing people crying, and knowing one of those cries was my mother. And I just remember standing in front of the judge, and I remember him just sentencing me to life without parole. And the only thing I remember, I was back in my cell with my older brother, who was also indicted. And he was defeated. Like, my brother is never defeated. He's the strongest guy I know. And he looked at me and he said, "If you want to cry, cry." And I did. I was in that jail cell crying. And he told me, "But you're crying for nothing." He said, "God's gonna let you out one of these days." He said, "Me, I don't know, but you," he said, "you're too good of a person that God's gonna let you out."
Jim, as Deputy Attorney General, why was it so important for you to do this, the Clemency Initiative?
As we were looking through some possibilities for clemencies, always happens around Christmas time. And in those days, clemencies were very, very unusual. Pardons were more common, but clemencies were very unusual. We started to see cases like Jason's, where young people had been convicted for the first time of a nonviolent, low-level drug offense and given life in prison. It was shocking. I mean, most people didn't believe it when we tried to explain to them, this is what we're finding in the records. That has such a detrimental impact on all the work that the Department of Justice does in trying to work with communities, in trying to get credibility in those communities for the work we're doing, in trying to fight crime in communities. When you have something as unfair as that, people don't believe in the system anymore. They won't cooperate with the system anymore. They don't respect the system anymore. And when people go to prison in that unfair way, their incentives to try and rebuild their lives, their incentives to try and do something to make themselves useful people really get destroyed. It's so miraculous that Jason didn't just fall apart in prison. He continued to have hope and continued to move forward. And it was really looking at those kinds of cases that I saw that made me, in the first instance, recommend the initial 8 to the president for clemency, saying, this is kind of a stretch. We've never done anything like this before, but I think there's a good reason for it. And, thankfully, he had the vision and the insight to accept that and to move forward with it.
So, Jim, I know in retrospect to all of us sitting here, it seems obviously like a great thing to do, but it was uncharted, it was unprecedented at the time, and I know you faced a lot of challenges in implementing it. Can you talk to us about some of the challenges that you faced in the early days of just getting the Clemency Initiative off the ground?
It's one of the things I learned in this job. It's one thing to have a great idea. It's another thing to actually implement it and make it work and have it administered and go forward. Those are two completely different things. And to get the resources and the people to do something that had never been done before, and there was resistance to it, both inside the department and politically. We had U.S. attorneys who just poo-pooed it, and at the time saying, come on, that can't be the case. And as the cases started to come across their desk and they were asked to review every case to make sure we weren't missing something in recommending the clemency, I started hearing from them saying, I thought you were crazy with this project. And then these cases came across my desk and I couldn't believe it. Somebody really was sentenced to life for a first-time low-level drug offense. He goes, that's outrageous. It started to take hold at that point. People started to understand that, yes, there was something that needed fixing. But to muster all of the resources, as you've described in your comments today, was really an enormous challenge. To try and weed through, because I knew once we opened this door, everybody was going to apply for clemency. and not everybody really fit the criteria. But you had to be careful to weed through it. And I owed a responsibility to the president, because if we started to have a high rate of recidivism, this thing was just going to blow up and blow up in his face. So we had to be careful that the people we did choose were people who were really the kinds of people you think about, that they make mistakes when they're young. It doesn't mean that's their whole life going forward, and you give them a second chance and they're going to be able to take advantage of it, just like Jason.
Jason, can you talk to us about the day that you learned you received clemency? Can you tell us how you got that news and what it was like?
Yeah, well, that day I do remember very well. And I'll never forget. And it kind of starts off like a fairy tale, right? It's December 19th. It's a cold, chilly afternoon. And I'm leaving the chow hall. It's 12 o'clock, and they say my name on their intercom. Jason Hernandez, report to the captain's complex. And at that moment, I had got cold chills, because the last time they told me to report to the captain's complex was in 2002, and that was to tell me that my older brother, JJ, that he was murdered. And so I didn't want to go to the captain's complex. They had to escort me over there. And I just remember sitting down, and I was scared. I didn't know what was happening. I thought I wanted to call my mom, I wanted to call my dad, but they wouldn't let me use the phone. And they had me surrounded. Nobody knows what's happening. And then the warden walks in, and I'm sitting down like Mr. Cole is, and he walks in front of me. He comes like in front of me like this, and he says, "Is your name?" He's looking at this paper. He's looking at this paper, and I can't see it. And he says, "Is your name Jason Hernandez? Inmate number 07031 078? I say, "Yes, sir, I am." And he goes, "Well, I have an executive order from the President of the United States, Barack Obama, commuting your life sentence to 20 years. You're no longer going to die in prison." And I tell him, "You're lying to me, man, you're lying to me." And he turns his paper around, and I see President Obama's signature and this gold seal, and he wasn't lying to me.
Jason, you've shared with me before that receiving clemency really changed the way you thought about your relationship with your community and your role in your community. Can you talk to us a little bit about what you mean by that?
I think for myself and for a lot of people that are African American or Latino, that you kind of grow up feeling society owes you, and you feel like you have a pass to do anything, even break laws, even sell drugs. And when I received my clemency, it gave me that insight to see that I was heard, that somebody was listening to me. And from that moment forward, I didn't feel like society owed me anything, but that I had owed society. The other thing too is the people that took my brother's life. March 28th, which was just a couple of weeks ago, I asked for forgiveness from the president, from the Lord, from everybody. And I found that it was only right to grant forgiveness to those people who killed my brother. So I sent them a letter March 28th, telling them that I forgave them and that I was sorry for hating them at one time in my life.
Wow. Jason, I know you came out of prison with a lot of goals and a lot of things you wanted to accomplish, but you also faced some challenges getting back on your feet. Can you talk to us a little bit about some of the challenges that you faced coming out of prison?
Well, I wasn't always a hometown hero. So, and you know, the community spent years trying to put me in prison and then to give me the key to the city. But it wasn't always like that. When I came out, people were scared of me. Nobody wanted to hire me. People didn't want me around their kids. And I kept getting turned down for application after application. And I had 17 days to get a job or they were gonna send me back, and I was on my 21st day. I was in a halfway house. And I said, you know what, I'm just gonna take my executive order that the president gave me. So I go to this job application, this job interview, and on check the box, I say, we'll explain. So the lady comes out, it's a welding job. And she comes out and she says, what is this? What do you mean you'll explain on your felony record? And I give her my executive order that the president gave me. And she starts reading it and she starts crying. And she says, hold up. And she goes back, she grabs some people that work there, and then they're all crying. And I start crying. And the lady said, you know what, Mr. Hernandez, my brother was incarcerated. And when he came out, nobody wanted to give him a chance, but somebody did. And now he just bought a house, he just got married, and he has 2 kids. So now I'm going to give you a chance as well.
Jim? Jim, I want to ask you how the Clemency Initiative fits into your legacy as Deputy Attorney General. How does hearing Jason's story and knowing that there are hundreds more people out there who are free because of clemency, what does that mean to you, and how does that fit into your legacy?
I would have to put this as probably the single greatest thing that I was able to have a role in my time at the Justice Department. It didn't just affect the people who were really worthy of that kind of clemency and that kind of forgiveness and that kind of second chance. You multiply that by 10 or by 100 or by 1,000 for each one, because it affects their families, it affects their communities, it affects people who know them, it affects people who don't know them. It affects how people view our criminal justice system and the work of our government, and whether the government is inclusive of even people who break the law, that our government has concern for them, and our government has compassion for them and wants to see them succeed and become part of this country of ours. I think it's as important a thing as I was ever involved in.
Thank you, Jim. Jason, Jim talked about the other people, not just the recipients, but the people standing behind them, waiting for them to come home. Your family was in that situation. What did it mean for your family to get you back?
Well, I think with the clemency, not only did I get my life back, but my mother and my father got their life back as well. It breathed life into me, and at the same time, it breathed life into them. And what I mean by that is that when I was incarcerated, my mother and father always told me everything was good when they would come visit me, but I knew everything wasn't good. And it wasn't until I got out when I was talking to my dad, and you know, he had told me that my mother was on medication, that she was going through depression. And my pops, who's a strong guy, right? Old school Mexican guy, and hard worker, doesn't cry, doesn't give up either. He had sat there and he had told me that there were several times when he was working for the city, driving a construction truck, that he had thought several times that he wanted to drive off one of the highways and take his own life. So, because he couldn't deal with the fact that I was in there for life without parole. JJ had been murdered in there, and I had another brother incarcerated as well. So when I think about clemency, I think about not only what it does for me, but what it does for our families, but then also for our communities as well.
Jason, you could still be in prison today serving a life sentence, but instead you're here at the Department of Justice sitting on stage next to Jim Cole. How does that feel? What does that mean to you?
Yeah, to meet one of the architects that set me free, that gave me my life back. And the theme this morning was do the right thing, right? And that's so funny because I was at a dinner last night and there were two individuals and they were talking about you, Mr. Cole. And they said, it's so weird. They were talking to each other and they said, what do you think Mr. Cole's gift is? What is his gift in life? And they say that you do the right thing. That's what they said. That's what they said this morning right here. I mean, and I just want to let you know, and Liz Oyer said it previously with my letter, that I had made a promise to the president that I was going to get out and I was going to not only change one, not two, but thousands and thousands of lives. And since my release, I would like to think that I've been doing that and I'll continue to do it and that I'll just be doing the right thing. And I think of you. When I think about my life now and how I'm judging everything that I do, last night it told me, Jason, are you doing the right thing? And I can't thank you enough for helping me out.
You are not a disappointment at all. You reaffirm everything I thought. You are a wonderful individual. You're a great American.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, Jason and Jim. I'd like to invite Alice Johnson and Ed Stanton into this conversation. Come on up. Alice Marie Johnson was born in rural Mississippi to parents who worked as tenant farmers. She was one of 9 children. Her sisters are here with her today. I haven't met her sisters, but I think I've spotted them right there. Alice had her first child while in high school. She became a mother of 5, and for years she worked as a secretary. In 1991, she became involved with drugs after she lost her job. She was arrested 2 years later, and in 1997, she was sentenced to life imprisonment at the age of 41. In prison, Alice did everything imaginable to better herself and those around her. She became certified in hospice care and counseling. She wrote and directed plays and concerts. She earned certifications in fitness training and electrical work, just to name a few. Alice's clemency application was supported by prison staff who described her as exemplary, outstanding, dependable, positive, knowledgeable, compassionate, respectful, and extremely worthy of a second chance. Alice's application was also supported by the man next to her, Edward Stanton III, then U.S. Attorney for the Western District of Tennessee. Ed is a native of Memphis, where he served as U.S. Attorney from 2010 to 2017. He's now a partner at the law firm Butler Snow. As U.S. Attorney, Ed distinguished himself in many ways, including his commitment to supporting those coming out of prison. Among other things, Ed led his office's involvement in the district court's reentry and drug court program. He appointed a dedicated reentry and prevention coordinator. He established an employer recruitment program to increase the number of businesses hiring people with felony convictions. He visited the federal prisons in his district quarterly to talk with incarcerated citizens about reentry. In short, Ed led by example in providing returning citizens with opportunities for success. Despite Ed's support, Alice was denied clemency in the final days of the initiative. But 18 months later, in June 2018, her sentence was commuted by President Trump. Since her release, Alice has devoted every waking moment to demonstrating that she was worthy of a second chance. She has become a noted advocate for clemency and criminal justice reform. She is Chief Executive Officer of the nonprofit Taking Action for Good. She has written a memoir about her journey from incarceration to freedom. She has been recognized by the United Nations as a women's rights defender, among many other accolades and honors. A few months ago, Alice returned to the prison in Alabama where she served her time. She spoke to the women there about the importance of hope. She said, "Choose to be light wherever you are, because if there is even one pinpoint of light in a dark place, there is no longer darkness." Alice has been that light for so many people. I am honored to have Alice and Ed here today. Let's give them a round of applause. All right, Alice, I'm going to start with you. How did you stay so positive while you were in prison, serving a life sentence, not knowing whether you would ever get the opportunity to come home?
Well, first of all, it was my foundation of faith. I was raised by very strong believers. My parents really never gave up, even though they were sharecroppers. They went on to really build a great life. They left that and they educated our family. They made sure that we had hope. And so it was really hope that kept me going, faith that kept me going. Plus, Liz, I made a decision that the only way someone could take my life, even though I was given a life plus 25-year sentence, is that if I give them my life. So instead of getting busy looking about the day I'm going to die in prison, I chose to live and to impact as much as I could the lives of others who I was incarcerated with for good.
Ed, as U.S. Attorney, you visited the prisons in your district regularly. Can you talk a little bit about what you learned by doing that and how it affected your approach to your work?
Of course. Liz, it's just great to be back in the Great Hall here. Yeah, so it was an initiative that I started, and I guess a little by way of background, as you mentioned, I served as U.S. Attorney for the Western District of Tennessee, which sits in Memphis. I was educated from preschool to law school in the area, so it was unique. I'd served as the first African-American male to serve in that capacity. And so it was important to me. Yes, we had a job to do with being intentional and dedicated to upholding the laws and holding individuals accountable that broke those laws. But at the same time, it was a commitment for me to get out of the office, the ivory tower, if you will, and get into the community, including the local federal prison. So you can imagine, you mentioned we would do this quarterly. You can imagine the first time, and we were coordinating with the warden, we called it kind of a pre-entry. Those individuals that were roughly 12 to 18 months from being released, to have a dialogue and say, hey, we want to make sure as the federal prosecutors that you don't come back, that I don't have to sign another indictment. But you can imagine the first few times we did that, there was a lot of question marks. People thought, oh, what's the catch here? That's the same guy that signed my indictment, and he's saying he wants to meet with us. And so it was a very small group that took us up on the offer there. But over the upcoming quarters, people saw the dedication there. We kept coming back. And what we did was a lot of listening. And what we found was people would say, Mr. Stanton, I don't want to come back here. This is my second or third time back. But when I get out, I don't have housing. There's challenges with transportation, getting my driver's license back, getting a job. And so we had this dialogue of, if you're committed, and again, most of these were handpicked low-level nonviolent offenders, but if you're committed and you do your part, we're going to do our part. And so we were able to work with the local transportation department in Memphis and Shelby County. We were able to cross-pollinate employers and individuals from a second chance standpoint, and it really became something where we started in a small room. We had a large gymnasium of individuals who were taking us up on the offer. But the question I would always ask is, what are you doing? It's easy to say, what are you guys going to do and get me a job? But those individuals that were serious about that second chance, we wanted to make sure we afforded that opportunity, and it turned out to be a success. I'll I'll only also add, it was not one time, Liz, that I visited that prison that I didn't see someone that I either grew up with in South Memphis, individuals I'd gone to school with. It was amazing just, again, being a part of the community. And I would share with those individuals that not that I'm any better than you all, but I was fortunate that I didn't get caught in the wrong car with the wrong crowd at a certain time. And so that was my commitment of saying I want to make sure we get those opportunities.
Thanks, Ed. Alice, you were a mother when you went to prison, and you became a grandmother and I think a great-grandmother while you were in prison. What was that like for you and your family, your absence during that time?
Well, my family, even though I was absent from them, I remained a strong part of my family. I believe that if you're a mother, you never stop being mama. So I learned to mother from the inside. And my children depended upon me. They'd ask for my advice. I celebrated the birth of my grandchildren as they were being born. And I made use of every tool that I had to communicate with them. I can't stand to sew. I took home ec 2 years and never really made a complete outfit. But I learned how to crochet, and I would send things home to my family. I've forgotten how to do it now because I don't have to. But I wanted them to have mementos from me. And of course, my family would come and visit when they had an opportunity. Liz, I want to say this. The first prison that I was sent to did not allow my children to visit. It was 1,500 miles away from my family. I did get a couple of visits while I was there, but I never got a visit from my children until I moved closer to home. So that was very important to me. I never allowed myself to be disconnected from my family. They come visit. We always have a good time on visits because I wanted that memory of myself in prison. I didn't want to put that burden on my family. It was already that I'm incarcerated. And had I been calling home, sometimes tears would be falling, but I didn't let them hear it in my voice. And I just did the best that I could to be that mother, that sister, that daughter, grandmother, great-grandmother to my children. And that still played a big role when I came home. Because when I came home, I didn't come home to strangers. I came home to my family.
Ed, as U.S. Attorney, you were consulted about your views on Alice's application for clemency. And initially you opposed it, and then you changed your mind and you supported it, and in fact tried to get it to a reconsideration of the decision to initially deny it. What changed your mind about Alice?
Yeah. So when the project came down and we began to get the letters in and the clemency request, I put a team together, our appellate chief, criminal chief, the Line AUSA who had prosecuted the cases, and we took those very seriously. And I read every letter, every document that came through with the request. As it relates to Ms. Johnson's request, there were some things that were not included that we were looking for, and there was one thing that stood out particularly, and I consulted with the prosecutor that had tried the case and said that Ms. Johnson, while she's done some good things and she's had some great things in her record, still has not taken accountability and responsibility for her actions. And there was one line or sentence or quote from back during the trial and sentencing, and there was some additional information that we decided, and ultimately I signed off, that this does not meet the criteria. That was a number of things, but that was one that was very important. Ms. Johnson mentioned earlier faith and family. And so the game changer, if you will, is I remember never a normal day in the U.S. Attorney's Office, but I was in and out of meetings, and my executive assistant said there's some individuals that want to meet with you. They don't have an appointment. And I mentioned that you're very busy. Typically, you have to have an appointment. And sometimes, just people will just walk up and say, I want to meet with the U.S. Attorney. And there's a reason why there are security measures and bulletproof windows and doors. You don't want to meet. I need to talk to him about my case. And so didn't know what we had going on. Just there are multiple individuals out in the lobby that want to meet with you. And so this was earlier in the morning. The day went on, and the receptionist said, Mr. Stan, they're still sitting here. And my assistant went back out and said, I'm sorry, he's so busy. In fact, I think I was getting ready to head out of town, but it got to the point I said, let me just go out. I want to meet with these individuals and see. And so Ms. Johnson's family, as you can tell, they rolled deep. They had packed out, literally, it was packed out the lobby, and but they were very respectful in the words she mentioned, faith and family. And they said, if you could just give us 5 minutes. 5 minutes is all we're asking for. We apologize for not calling ahead. And ultimately I said, sure, let's come back. I don't have a lot of time, but I'll give you 5 minutes. And so we went back to my personal conference room. And when I tell you, and I'm not sure that any of them have a JD or a law degree, but when I tell you they put on a case, and they had documents and files and a number of the questions that I had, and by this time I'd called back again the line prosecutor who had tried the case. And we listened, we did a lot of listening, and everything and at every point, and quite frankly, the record was incomplete. What I received and what we reviewed was incomplete. And so at that point, I said, I can't make any promises. I want to verify some items that you're sharing with me. We didn't have a lot of time, and they made it clear, we don't have a lot of time, but we really need you to consider this. And it was within, I think, less than 2 days that I was able to verify and went back on the record and sent the letter to the pardon attorney and shared with them that I was reversing my decision. And as was mentioned earlier, oftentimes being a U.S. attorney or federal prosecutor, there's a tremendous amount of power and responsibility that comes with that. And my mantra has always been, I want to be on the side of justice and right, and so egos were checked at the door. This was when I felt like we got wrong when we got the information. But for the family that came in, I'm not sure that things would have changed, but that was something that I put my stamp on, reversed the decision, and I outlined the rationale and sent that information here to Washington in full support of clemency for Ms. Johnson.
So, Alice, you didn't get clemency just then, but I know it meant a lot to you to have Ed's support. Can you talk a little bit about what it meant to you and your family to have his support at that time?
Once we received Ed's full support, I felt like someone actually is seeing me. When they presented my case, as he said, we rode deep. When we rode, 4 of my sisters are here, 2 of my siblings couldn't make it, but my children would have been here too had they been here. But we rode real deep when we're on our mission. But what it meant to my family, it infused hope. And no one could put that out. It was like we already had hope, but Ed started a flame. Knowing that someone actually saw me as an individual, we were unstoppable. At that point, there was nothing that could stop us from pushing on for my clemency. And Liz, I just want to say this. I have so many supporters in this audience. I'm not going to call your names, but could you just hold your hands up, those who really fought for my clemency? You'll see them sitting all around, include Mark Osler, who was on TV asking for it on CNN. They were telling me about him on TV. Jessica Topeka, Britney, who was one of my attorneys, Jessica, anyway, you know who you are. But I just want to say that started it. But knowing that so many people around the country were advocating, and also it's like that hope was contagious. Signatures were coming forth. My daughter had started a petition. Before it was over 270,000 people had signed a petition for my release. The city of Memphis got behind me so strongly. So when I came home, it was like this huge celebration. Just every time I see that someone else was talking about me, people came to the White House. I think Topeka had a button on saying "Free Alice Johnson" and Jessica, and some other people too. But my family came too. You can't be hopeless. They wouldn't let me not have hope. But what Ed did when he reversed his decision, we said nothing would stop us. We're getting out. Not just me. When I say we're getting out, Because when one person goes to prison, you don't go alone. Your whole family goes with you. They're serving that time with you. So we were saying, we're coming home.
Alice, you've been home now for 5, coming up on 6 years. What lies ahead for you in the next 5?
The next 5 years, if they can top these, I know it's going to top it. I'm looking forward to doing even more in these next 5 years. There's a couple of people in this audience who I helped advocate for their freedom who received clemency also, and that was Kwame Kilpatrick and Adrian Miller. They're here with us today. But I plan on advocating, continue the advocacy work. I'm working also as I hear of bills that are coming forward that could help individuals not have so much the supervised release portion of it. So I'm really working strongly with that, and I have a passion in my heart for the youth. The first place that I visited when I came home was a youth detention center, and I saw the difference that I made in their lives, and really looking at them too. We cannot leave them behind. So the prevention space is something that I'm very, very passionate about because I believe that that's going to be the biggest way that we're going to reduce the prison population is to prevent our children from going. So that is something I'm working on very, very hard with. So I just really think that these next 5 years, I never would have thought that 5 years of freedom could have passed so quickly. I was even selected by Ebony Magazine as one of the 100 most powerful blacks in America. And it was not, and they had a category under criminal justice reform, but I was selected as a community builder. And I find that when you restore families, when you have just laws, when you help fight for justice, when you lead with compassion and mercy, then you are rebuilding communities. So I'm excited, and I'm excited about my work with you, Liz. Liz has honored me to be able to work on her pardon, revising the pardon process, the application. So I love working with Liz. I also work with Colette Peters. I don't believe that we should be separated by who's in office. Whoever has a heart for this work, that's who I want to partner with. Whoever is willing to do good and help with the mission of helping others. So I have to applaud you, Liz, for what you've done too.
Thank you, Alice. Well, I am very much looking forward to see what both of you do next. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
All right, I want to bring our last 2 panelists into the conversation, Britney Barnett and Sharonda Jones. Britney and Sharonda were both raised in rural East Texas, though their paths did not cross until later in life. Britney's mother was a nurse who became addicted to crack cocaine when Britney was 10 years old. She later went to prison. Sharonda's mother was in a terrible car accident when her 4 children were little. She became a quadriplegic. Despite these obstacles, both Britney and Sharonda had big dreams for their futures. Britney dreamed of being Claire Huxtable, the no-nonsense lawyer mom from The Cosby Show. Britney graduated from the University of Texas and became a certified public accountant. She later earned a law degree and joined a corporate law firm. Sharonda began working at the age of 14. After graduating high school, she earned a cosmetology license. She opened her own salon and also managed a restaurant. She became a mother to a little girl. Sharonda began supplementing her income by selling crack cocaine. In 1999, at age 31, she was sentenced to life in prison. Her daughter was 8 years old at the time. 10 years later, Britney learned of Sharonda's case while researching a law school paper. She visited Sharonda in prison, and Sharonda became her first client. Britney spent the next 6 years fighting for her freedom. In 2013, Britney submitted Sharonda's clemency application. She worked on it nights and weekends while spending her days as a corporate lawyer, and it was really good. The application included a letter that Sharonda wrote to President Obama. In it, she said this: "I have now been incarcerated for over 14 years. With a life sentence, I am set to die in prison for my very first conviction. But I keep the faith because I believe my lowest moments are my best moments, knowing that during those low moments, I am growing in strength and compassion. When I first came to prison, I told myself, you can be bitter or you can be better. I am not bitter because I hold on to hope." On December 18, 2015, President Obama granted Sharonda clemency. Sharonda reunited with her daughter, and she's now a grandma. She operates her own food truck in Dallas. Britney has gone on to represent many more clients fighting for their freedom, including 7 who were granted clemency during the initiative. She was also part of the team that represented Alice Johnson. In her spare time, Britney has published a critically acclaimed memoir, started a foundation to support small businesses formed by justice-impacted entrepreneurs, and created a nonprofit to benefit girls with mothers in prison. She is amazing. Sharonda is amazing. I'm so delighted to have them both here today. Please give them a round of applause. Sharonda, I'd like to start with you. Could you take us back to the day that you were sentenced to life in prison and tell us about that day?
It was like the 4th day of my trial. I owned a restaurant, so I had went to work that morning. I was leaving around maybe 11:30, 12, going to trial. So on the 4th day, after I left work to go to trial, left my purse in the car, had dropped my daughter off at school, just a normal hot Texas day. So after the trial, like during the trial, I saw marshals walk in, and my attorney said, "Don't look around, marshals is in, something bad has happened." And I was like, what? Because I was such on the low end of this whole case. I'm like, what could happen? Like, I didn't even take it serious that I'm just going in here to, get my testimony, come out. That day, marshals stood behind me, and they told me to stand, and they put handcuffs on me. My body was totally numb, no emotions at all. I could not cry. Could not.
Britney, you didn't learn about Sharonda's story until she'd already been in prison for 10 years, but when you did, you got right on it. What moved you so much about her situation and her story that you decided to visit her in prison?
Yeah, I laugh now, can I say delusion? Because I was a law student just thinking I could save the world, but I really saw so much of myself in Sharonda. As you mentioned, she was a black daughter of the rural South, and it was just something about her case that tugged at my soul. And even though I was a law student, I knew that I had to do something to help free Sharonda Jones. I didn't know what. I actually wrote her a letter, and I told her that I was a law student, that I knew next to nothing about criminal law, but that I wanted to help get her out of prison. And I still have her response from 2009, and she was very nice. She wished me well in my studies, but it was kind of like, yeah, right. Like, how you gonna get me out? And so I kept writing her. As you mentioned, my mother had been incarcerated, and I just understood firsthand the devastating impact that comes from maternal incarceration.
And Sharonda, you trusted Britney with your life. She came to visit you, and she was a stranger, and you just formed an instant bond. Can you tell us why that was?
At first, it was for sure, yeah, right. I threw that letter to the back. I was like, yeah. And she's a student. No way she gonna help me get out. She's wasting my time. So she said, I'm a visit. So when she visits, she started visiting often. So I was like, oh, is she for real? And she's not asking me for money. So I was like, what do I have to lose? So we became like 2 peas in a pod, like praying all the time, doing legal work all the time.
Can I ask you about the time you were incarcerated, what it was like being a mother to a young daughter? What was it like for your daughter and for you to be separated during that time?
That was hard because we get 300 minutes a month to use the phone. And I called my daughter every single day, 10 minutes a day. I could only talk to other people if she didn't want to talk that day. But I actually raised her on those 10 minutes a day, giving her the good and the bad every single day.
So, Britney, you were the first one to learn that Sharonda had been granted clemency. Can you tell us what it was like for you to receive that news and then what it was like to share it with Sharonda?
Yeah, so that week, everyone in this room knows that we were waiting when President Obama was in office, the week that he was going to be leaving for Hawaii. And that week, Monday went by, Tuesday went by, Wednesday, Thursday, and no word from the White House. And I, was in touch with many people, in this room. Cynthia Roseberry, we're just waiting, is there going to be a grant? And I was actually with my mom. My mom had been released, she's doing very well. And we were out holiday shopping for young girls with mothers in prison. And I got a call on my cell phone from D.C., and it was an attorney from the pardon attorney's office. And she told me that President Obama had granted Sharonda Jones clemency. And it was, my mom and I pulled over immediately. We were in the convenience store parking lot, and we got out the car. We were dancing, crying, and just incredibly, incredibly happy.
What was it like for you, Sharonda, to get that call from Britney?
It was an unusual day for me because being incarcerated, I had a problem and I had a phobia about being locked in the building. So when they unlocked the doors every morning, I would run out, be the first out. So this particular morning, for some reason, I couldn't leave. And I'm looking at the officer as if he's gonna say something to me, but it was a normal day. So about an hour later, he came and said, Ms. Jones, don't go to lunch. The unit manager's coming to talk to you. So at that point, I was kind of nervous because the last time a high authority came to talk to me, it was when they was coming to tell me, that my mother was passing. So I have to say this. Thank you, Alice. Alice was with me during that time. They actually went and got her first to tell me that my mother was dying. So I'm forever grateful for her for assisting me through that process because that was the toughest time of my life. But that day, I felt the same way. However, it was another lady with me and she had life. So I was like, this gotta be good news. We just gonna start praying. So I started praying and they called me in the office. Of course, they couldn't tell me. They was just like, come with us. And the phone rang. It was Britney on the other end and she was like, you free, you coming home? And I was like, for real, why you didn't tell me? She said, I'm telling you now. And I was crying, I started praying, so all the staff members came to assist me. All my friends was right there crying and screaming for me, so that was an amazing day. That was the joy of my life. It made it all simple that day.
Can you talk to us a little bit about what you've been doing since?
So since, of course, clemency that granted my freedom is always first and foremost to my heart because I know I would not be free today without the Clemency Project. And since I've been out, I've been helping others. I built a food truck. I built this truck so I could know everything about this truck. The name of my food truck is Fed Up, like coming from the feds, fed up. So I built this truck in hopes to hire individuals like me who had served time or a little time because one of my problems was being a felon. They don't want to hire you for real. So when I look at my applications, if you're not a felon, I'm not going to hire you for real. So, and also to help with young adults that have parents incarcerated because my truck is love. So when you come to my truck, I treat you like a mom. I treat you like a sister. So that's what I'm doing now, cooking on Fed Up food truck.
Thank you so much, Sharonda and Britney, for being with us today and for sharing your stories.
Thank you.
I want to thank all of our panelists, Jason, Jim, Alice, Ed, Sharonda, and Britney for sharing their stories with us today. The clemency grants made by multiple presidents have given second chances to so many deserving people. We've seen proof of that today. But we have more work to do. When the Clemency Initiative was announced in 2014, Deputy Attorney General Cole said this: "For our criminal justice system to be effective, it needs not only to be fair, but also to be perceived as being fair. Older, stringent punishments that are out of line with sentences imposed under today's laws erode people's confidence in our criminal justice system. This is just as true today as it was then. We have more work to do to ensure that all of those sentenced under outdated laws and policies can seek relief. Thousands of people remain incarcerated today under mandatory minimums that were eliminated by the First Step Act. For many, they are effectively life sentences. We have much more work to do to ensure that they are not left behind." I want to thank all of the clemency recipients in this room and watching by video. You are living proof that second chances make our communities safer, stronger, and more just, as the president said. I also want to thank the extraordinary team in the Office of the Pardon Attorney who has worked so hard to make these clemencies happen. Several of my remarkable colleagues served during the 2014 initiative and are still going strong. Roz, Kira, Jackie, Linda, Jordan, thank you for your dedication. Finally, thank you to my colleagues in the Office of the Deputy Attorney General and to the incredibly dedicated clemency team in the White House Counsel's Office. They are working so hard to uplift and expand second chances through clemency. Thank you all for being here today. We are adjourned.